Meeting. Today we have a presentation by Mr. Joseph Espinoza, Assistant Special Agent in charge of the Social Security Administration Office of Inspector General. And before we go there to our presentation, we'll ask for requests for bill drafts for introduction. Are there any requests for bill drafts for introduction from the committee? I have one. It's RS 0853, and that regards the legislative oversight on increasing benefits for Medicaid. That's 0853. Any questions, comments on that, committee? Seeing none, the request is accepted. Any bill requests from the bill draft request from the audience? Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will this remind me of the deadline for committee bill introductions? Will this be our last opportunity to introduce bills in this committee, or will we meet another time before the deadline?
So we will have a meeting on Thursday, and I believe the deadline for committee-sponsored bill drafts is Monday. So okay. Thursday would be the deadline. I do not plan on meeting Friday or at the rail on Monday, so Thursday would be the deadline.
Thank you.
Does that work for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Very good. So that bill draft is requested and accepted, and no bill draft requests from the audience. So we'll move right to the presentation. Welcome, Mr. Espinoza. This is, I guess, I'll just real quick preface. It's more of a conversation about just some of the work with the public assistance programs and how they're implemented, and kind of, you know, anywhere there's people involved, there's the potential of abuse of a system. And kind of when we take a look at the public assistance programs, there's the letter of the law, the spirit of the law, and there's eligibility requirements. A lot of these are federally requested or mandated, and some of them are state, required. But I think it's important to kind of see from Mr. Espinoza's perspective, the work he does behind the scenes, taking a look at sometimes how people may not be using the programs correctly. And at the end of the day, the programs are there for those who are in most need. And when somebody's taking advantage of the system unjustly, it's simply pushing out people who need the programs more. So thank you for your work. Welcome to committee, and you're free to go.
Thank you, Chairman Auerkamp, Vice Chair Riley, Ranking Minority Member Ford Carr. Thank you for inviting me today to testify. I'm honored to discuss the Social Security Administration Office of the Inspector General Cooperative Disability Investigations, or also known as the CDI program. More importantly, the success of the Kansas CDI unit's achievements through the amazing partnership with Kansas agencies. To have a better understanding of the CDI program and the impact of the Kansas CDI unit of combating fraud within the disability programs in the state, I'd like to highlight the SSA disability programs and those Kansans receiving disability payments. Disability payments distributed by the Social Security Administration are essential financial resource for many Americans that have encountered incidents, accidents, or illnesses preventing them from working substantial gainful activity. These disability benefits provide income and medical insurance where an individual would otherwise have no means of generating income from the gainful employment. Disability is authorized to be paid to those individuals who qualify from two of SSA programs. The first, Title 16 or Supplemental Security Income, and the second, the Old Aged Survivors and Disability Insurance, are referred to as the OASDI. SSA reported in 2023 a total of 44,688 Kansans were recipients of supplemental security income. This includes aged, blind, and disabled persons, distributing approximately $31.4 million on average of $704 per recipient. Recipients of SSI often qualify for other state benefit programs such as Medicaid, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Programs or SNAP benefits, housing assistance, and other state-funded supplements. SSI is paid to those individuals who qualify, requiring many restrictions such as having qualified disability, income, and resource thresholds. This program is often touted as a welfare program and a safety net intended for the most indigent in society. SSA also reported in 2023 a total of 62,691 Kansans were beneficiaries of Title II disability payments, totaling approximately $93.3 million, or an average of $1,489 per beneficiary payment. Title II disability benefits are authorized for those who qualify after paying into the system working 10 qualified work years. Title II disability benefits are authorized for those who qualify. These benefit payments are based on the individual's earnings throughout the course of their employment years. This program also has requirements to qualify. For example, one must be disabled, there are earning restrictions, and an individual's functional limitations must prevent the individual from performing substantial gainful activity. To meet SSA's definition of disability, the individual must not be able to engage in any substantial gainful activity because of a medically determinable physical or mental disability that is either 1, expected to result in their death, or 2, has lasted or is expected to last for a continuous period of at least 12 months. In fiscal year 2024, SSA reported 18,135 disability applications were filed by Kansans, averaging 349 disability applications per week. This is in addition to those individuals previously mentioned and includes applications for each of the previously noted programs, and in some cases, applications are concurrently for both of the disability programs. The SSA OIG has an enormous responsibility to protect taxpayer dollars. Our mission is to serve the public through independent oversight of SSA's programs and operations. We accomplish our mission by conducting independent audits, evaluations, and investigations. We search for and report systemic weaknesses in SSA programs and operations, and finally, providing recommendations for programs and operations and management improvements of those programs. Fraud in the SSA programs weakens the trust fund. Those individuals who cheat the system take money away from those who truly need it most by providing them with a measure of financial security. Social Security has a zero tolerance for fraud. To combat fraud in disability programs, the CDI program was created as a nationwide task force comprised of federal and state agencies. This task force investigates suspected fraud in SSA disability programs and in other federal and state benefit and public assistance programs. CDI is operated jointly by the Social Security Administration, special agents from the Social Security Office of Inspector General, state and local law enforcement agencies, and the State Disability Determination Services. In 1997, the CDI program began as a pilot with just 5 CDI units. As of September 12, 2022, at the direction of and in compliance with the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015, there is now 50 CDI units covering all 50 states. The District of Columbia, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, in addition to the U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, American Samoa, and the Northern Mariana Islands. The CDI program is instrumental to ensure only people who qualify for Social Security benefits receive them. During fiscal year 2024, the CDI program as a whole reported over $80 million in projected savings to SSA disability programs, and over $101 million to non-SSA programs such as Medicare, Medicaid, housing assistance, and nutrition assistance programs. And we recovered over $15 million in SSA monies, tangible monies, to disability programs. Since inception, the CDI investigations have contributed to projected savings to the American taxpayers of approximately $8.1 billion, of which $4.48 billion in projected savings to SSA's Title II and Title XVI disability programs, and $3.6 billion in projected savings to related federal and state benefit programs. CDI investigations have also achieved over 700 criminal prosecutions and judicial actions against defendants. Members of the committee may question what advantages there are for a state to partner with the CDI program. In addition to the significant program savings in state Medicaid and Medicare supplements, food stamp benefits, state SSI supplements, and other state-funded programs, the key factor for participation is that it does not require the state to fund any aspect of program participation. The CDI program partnership is fully reimbursable to participating agencies. SSA pays for CDI participants' salaries, benefits, equipment, vehicles, and freeing up those otherwise obligated funds at the agency level. Additional advantages appreciated by partner agencies include improving the integrity of federal and state-funded programs, promoting the solvency of federal and state-funded benefit programs, and preserving the public trust and confidence in federal and state-funded benefit programs, and to help combat fraud, waste, and abuse in public assistance programs across the board. I would now like to take a moment to focus on the Kansas CDI unit, which conducts investigations exclusively in the state of Kansas of individuals that are either currently receiving disability insurance benefits under Title II or supplemental security income payments under Title 16 and are suspected of violating any of the program requirements or are alleged to have filed fraudulent disability applications. To complete this mission, the Kansas CDI unit relies on critical support from key stakeholders and partner agencies. The Kansas Disability Determination Services, or DDS, is a critical stakeholder in the CDI program. The Kansas DDS is responsible for reviewing the medical information associated to all disability claims that are filed by Kansans. Their primary role is to evaluate medical information associated to the disability claimant and make medical determinations as to if the claimant meets the criteria for a disabling condition. When evaluating a claimant's medical record, Kansas DDS sometimes comes across information in a given medical file that may present certain high-risk fraud factors, such factors as conflicting medical information. And for example, a claimant alleges he or she cannot function in certain settings, but the medical evidence collected from treating physicians suggests the claimant can function at or above their alleged limitations on their disability application. Another example may present when there is missing medical information to support the claimant's allegations of disability. Or Kansas DDS may receive a third-party report or allegations of the claimant's malingering or falsifying their disabling conditions. These factors alert the Kansas DDS professionals to seek additional avenues to collect material information and evidence associated to the claimant and their alleged disability. One of the avenues Kansas DDS has to mitigate their concerns is to refer the alleged claim to the Kansas CDI unit for further investigation, to collect material evidence that will aid DDS in making the most appropriate medical determination. As a critical stakeholder in the CDI program, the Kansas DDS has dedicated one full-time employee assigned to the Kansas CDI unit. In most cases, this requires the Kansas CDI unit to obtain direct observations of the claimant functioning in society outside the settings of medical professionals. To accomplish this mission, the SSA-OIG has a dedicated special agent CDI team leader to lead, coordinate, and investigate allegations of fraud. However, the OIG special agent cannot do this alone. The Kansas CDI unit relies on critical state partners to perform investigations alongside the OIG special agent. In the case of the Kansas CDI unit, we have the essential support and partnership with the Kansas Department of Children and Families, Office of the General Counsel Fraud Investigations Unit. The Kansas DCF, FIU, investigators assigned to the Kansas CDI unit are critical to combating disability fraud in Kansas. To date, the Kansas CDI unit is staffed with 6 team members: the SSA OIG Special Agent Team Leader, an SSA CDI Program Specialist, 1 Kansas DDS Program Specialist, 2 Kansas DCF FIU Field Special Investigators, and 1 Kansas DCF FIU Special Investigator focused on digital and open source intelligence analysis. We are grateful for the support of our Kansas partners. I'm proud to announce in 2024, the Kansas CDI reached new heights following the pandemic era. The unit accomplished $8.7 million in total monetary achievements and recoveries, of which $3.5 million was attributed to the SSA disability programs and $4.8 million for Medicaid and Medicare, of which $3.2 million is directly tied to Medicaid savings, a cost which is shared with the state of Kansas, and $391,000 in tangible SSA money recoveries from our investigations. It is likely the unit's investigations also saved countless other public assistance program monies in the state of Kansas. The Kansas CDI unit opened 90 investigations, closed 80 investigations, and achieved a claim denial or cessation rate of 76%, accounting for 61 claims denied or ceased by the Kansas Disability Determination Services. The success we made in 2024 were not without prior significant sustainability challenges within the Kansas CDI program. Prior to partnering with the Kansas DCF FIU, our investigative partner, now a non-law enforcement authorized agency, the unit enjoyed a partnership with the Kansas Department of Labor Special Investigations Unit and the Overland Park, Kansas Police Department. Both are law enforcement agencies per Kansas statute. After the switch of the governor administration in 2019, the Overland Park, Kansas withdrew their participation from the unit. A year later, the Kansas Secretary of Labor withdrew their participation from the unit. From 2020 to January of 2024, the Kansas CDI unit continued operations without a law enforcement partner. In August of 2023, Kansas DCF Secretary Laura Howard signed a memorandum of understanding with our agencies to partner with the Kansas CDI unit, and investigators began operating the unit in January of 2024. To the members of the committee, I would like to reemphasize the critical support from the state of Kansas for the CDI program. There needs to be a solution for long-term cooperation, long-term sustainability, and long-term support from state agencies to combat disability and public assistance fraud in the state of Kansas. Creating a sustainable future for the Kansas CDI unit through legislative action to codify a permanent partnership between the CDI program and the state of Kansas will ensure that our state will continue to fight against fraud for all citizens of the state. Members of the committee, I thank you for your time, and I welcome any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Espinoza. We'll open up for questions. Representative Helwig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate your comments today. Just kind of a quick question. I know you're doing an investigation. You said looking at medical records and that kind of thing could trigger an investigation. Is there other things that trigger investigation, public reports or anything like that?
For a point of clarification, when you say public reports, you mean like the public reporting someone as?
Reporting.
Yes, citizen reporting. Yes, the Kansas DDS can receive third-party reports. However, most of those third-party reports come directly to our agency through our website interface of reporting fraud. Yes, we do receive those.
Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To build on Representative Hog's question, is there any kind of appeals process for a citizen report? I imagine you may get some jilted exes, things like that.
As far as an appeals process for a report, if I could just kind of lay out the investigative platform that we use. So if you were to report an allegation of fraud through that interface, someone from my team would go through and conduct a thorough analysis of the allegation. Who's reporting it, if they provide their information, who the alleged subjects are, and we would need to even see if the person, one, has applied for benefits or currently is on benefits. So there's not really an appeal process for somebody that has reported, or if a defendant wanted to appeal the fact that an allegation was reported, they can, in fact, appeal the adjudication or the outcome of the investigation.
Thank you. That is what I meant.
Oh, sorry.
May I ask one more question? Thank you. So obviously we've seen some news today about freezing of federal funds, and there's cooperation here with the federal government. Could you maybe educate us on the role that perhaps any federal grants may play in these programs or your investigations, things like that? Just educate us a little bit.
Not familiar with the exact report of the freezing of federal funds you're referring to. I did see some potential for executive action coming from this administration. However, the funding for this program is already allocated and it's already secured. So any funding specifically for the CDI program, there are no concerns. We have two types of partnerships, if I may reference my testimony. We previously had a relationship with the Kansas Department of Labor and the Overland Park, Kansas Police Department. The funding avenues for both of those were a little different. The federal government statutorily is allowed to enter into a financial relationship with a state entity. However, they are not with a municipality or county. So with the case of Overland Park, Kansas Police Department, we had a contract actually with them, and that would have been a contractual obligation that they would have been able to continue to get paid. So as far as the CDI program is concerned, I can speak to the funding availability. I can't speak to other grants.
Representative Pickert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious about the penalties for fraudulently using SSI or any of the benefits. Is it always prison? Is it paying back what they took illegally? I mean, what happens?
Sure. Ma'am, thank you for the question. It depends on the specific circumstances of the crime. All of the investigations that we conduct are criminal in nature. Partly, in fact, if someone were to falsify a disability application, that's a falsification of records. Kansas has a statute that supports that, as well as does the federal government under Title 18, Section 1001. The Social Security Act also has federal violation statutes under Title 42, Section 408, which relates to the Title II disability program, and Title 42, Section 1383 for the Supplemental Security Program, which, for example, just failing to report somebody in a home for SSI, for example, is a violation, okay? Or failing to report income. It's an affirmative responsibility of the disability claimant to report these things. So all of those are federal violations. Now, we just merely collect the facts and present that to an adjudicative body, whether that be the U.S. Attorney's Office, a state district attorney's office, or back to, from an administrative side, the Kansas Disability Determination Services, or SSA, to make an administrative adjudication as to whether or not they meet the eligibility requirements. So can a case result in jail time? Yes, if it is prosecuted under the color of the law. Most of the cases that my unit investigates occur prior to payments being issued to the disability beneficiary. So there's a significant cost savings for us to stop those payments if through our investigation evidence is collected to prove that the individual did not meet those disabling conditions or the criteria for disability.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming here today and providing us with this very important information. My question has somewhat evolved based on the questions that my colleagues posed prior to this. My question would begin with respect to the investigation process. Can you kind of walk us through what that might look like? Are the individuals made aware that there's been a, and I'm kind of combining two different things here because I understand that there may be different situations, but in the event that someone has made a citizen finding or awareness, is that person then made aware that they're being investigated, that they're under investigation? I understand this is going to be different than someone who has most recently applied for benefits, but just kind of how does that work with respect to the proving portion of that? How do we know that how do we know that we're making the right decision?
Well, thank you for the question, Ranking Member Carr. I would say, if I could use an analogy of a police department in your hometown or a sheriff's department, if someone were to call and make a complaint on me, right, I may not be made aware of that until law enforcement contacted me. And through our investigations, that's pretty much the same thing. If I need to make contact with someone who's under investigation, I obviously make them aware of it at that time. If I don't need to make contact because I've either been able to disprove the allegations against them, or we've collected sufficient information in our investigations through medical records or whatever other evidence supporting their claim that we have, we don't necessarily have to make contact with them.
If I may, a follow-up. So in the event or in the situation that you mentioned that someone had made a citizen complaint, and whether that was confirmed, well, I guess they'll find out in short time if it was a confirmation made, but are they ever made aware if you don't have any findings that, for instance, if, someone has a neighbor and they're in a conflict with the neighbor, and, are they made aware that there's been, an allegation or several allegations, or are they ever made aware of the process that's taking place, behind the scenes, so to speak?
The short answer.
That does it.
So we don't, yes and no. So when I say yes, we subcontract with municipalities and counties to be partners on our task force, and that's because of the funding mechanisms from the federal government too, right? The state entity at the municipality or county level. But we do not have any non-law enforcement or non-investigatory entity contracted like a private company doing these investigations.
Thank you. And then second, do you ever investigate businesses that take these payments, or is it just individuals only?
So yes, the other component of the Office of Inspector General is our Office of Investigations Field Operations Division. They do more of those investigations where third parties might be involved, such as a representative payee of a disability claimant that might be stealing or misusing money for that disability claimant. They would investigate that aspect of that. Or we do have what we refer to as third-party facilitator investigations, where you might find a doctor or an attorney or a non-attorney representative who is colluding either with a disability claimant or someone else to file fraudulent claims.
Thank you.
Real quick, committee, sorry, I should have mentioned this at the beginning of the year, but if you have multiple questions, feel free to ask the questions, because it's important to get to the bottom of what you're asking, and sometimes it takes several questions. So feel free to ask as many questions as you need. If it goes on too long, I may stop just for the sake of allowing others to ask, but that rarely happens. Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Super fascinating. I appreciate all the information. So kind of a couple of high-level questions. You specifically are dealing with disability, your unit, your CDI unit, it's about disability. Is there an equivalent of you that does investigations for other entitlement, Medicaid and Medicare and all of that?
Yes, absolutely. So to specify, the Social Security Inspector General conducts investigations specifically for the Social Security programs, the disability programs. The CDI unit is focused primarily on the disability aspect of that, whether one is or is not disabled. We often interact with other public assistance programs or federally part-funded state programs such as Medicaid, as you noted. For example, if our disability claimant that we're investigating is currently receiving supplemental security income, they're most likely already receiving Medicaid as well. So we do often have that. To answer your question, are there other agencies that do investigate that? Yes. I know within the state of Kansas, you have the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit under the Attorney General's office, who primarily goes after the doctor's offices and larger institutions for fraudulently billing information back to Medicaid or Medicare, or Medicaid in that case. You recently have established a Medicaid Office of the Inspector General that looks more at the individual beneficiary level under the Attorney General's office as well. And then the Fraud Investigations Unit with DCF, who we're currently partnered with, is responsible for conducting investigations within the SNAP program for the state, which is also partially funded, my understanding, by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, who also has an investigative entity within their Office of Inspector General, who does larger scale food stamp fraud investigations with many other programs as well.
And so you said you partnered with them, with DCF?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can you explain that just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So after the last administration, and as I referenced in my testimony, the Kansas Department of Labor, your Kansas Department of Labor, their Special Investigations Unit was on our task force. We had a memorandum of understanding with them, and we were paying all of the salaries and benefits for the personnel to be on our task force. We also had Overland Park, Kansas. Whenever they left, respectively, in 2019 and 2020, we were without a partner. We were soliciting different interest from other law enforcement agencies. For example, I met with the Johnson County, Kansas Sheriff's Department. I spoke briefly with the district attorney's office in the 10th Judicial District, and then I spoke to the Inspector General for Medicaid here at the state level. Finally, landing with Kansas DCF kind of made sense. So you also heard me reference the Disability Determination Services. They are a subordinate entity within the state structure under the Department of Children and Families, and their Fraud Investigations Unit, because we do have so much crossover with other public assistance programs such as the SNAP or food stamp program, they were very gracious enough to partner with us as our investigative team. So we have a memorandum of agreement on file for their partnership.
Okay, and then it seems kind of like if you had an ask that was in here, it's to codify the permanent partnership between the CDI program and the state of Kansas.
I think that would be my number one, yes.
And what would that look like, do you think?
So we've tested this with some other states. I know in Tennessee, they recently went through a process, and I understand it had a sunset clause, and it had recently expired their most recent session. They were very aggressive in it, and they actually created a separate entity, which was a disability OIG at the state level, which we funded. I don't know that we need to go to that level of extent of creating a whole new agency within the state of Kansas. I think we could easily satisfy that by codifying through some legislative, whether a proviso or whatnot, if you wanted to do on a trial basis, having this partnership codified in statute so that whenever we have a change in leadership in the government, our partners are just not jumping ship and we can have continuity of operation. So for example, if we were to utilize the DCF partnership that we have now, if there could be some, and you have to forgive me, I'm not a legislator, I don't understand how the laws work here, as far as putting it all together, I have some good idea, but if we could solidify that through statute somehow, that there would be an ongoing relationship at no cost to the state as well, just so that we could have continuity of operations.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I may, I said that was one. The second thing, the biggest ask, which was not in here, I think would be able to create some public assistance or benefit fraud violations that mirrored exactly with what you have in the requirements of the statutes for one to be eligible. And that may have been done already, but the statutes that currently are on the books that I'm aware of are somewhat cumbersome at the state level to charge somebody with. So if, say, for example, someone were to have fraudulently defrauded the Social Security Administration, and in doing so, also the Medicaid program and also the SNAP program, and we were not able to prosecute them or pursue any sort of action at the federal level, my next turn would be to the state level. And if I don't have any definitive benefit fraud statutes, we're trying to piecemeal this in with theft statutes and things that don't necessarily align with the violations that occurred. So that would be my second, and that's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
know anybody on the Judiciary Committee.
Sounds like judiciary, doesn't it?
She's Representative Humphrey's chair of Judiciary. So Representative Carr.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Briefly, if you could, with respect to those individuals that would have a mental disability, does your investigative unit investigate those as well?
Yes, sir, we do.
And do you have members of your staff that do that, or is that something that you have some sort of an MOU with some psychiatric, if that's the word I would use in this case, professionals, or how would that work?
Yes, sir, and you make a good point. None of my staff are medical professionals. None of my staff have the credentials to make an assertion or assessment of an individual's functional abilities, whether it's a physical disability or for a mental component. The Kansas Disability Determination Services is just that. They, as the state agency, are staffed with the medical professionals that make those evaluations from our findings and make a determination as to if it meets that criteria as the medical professional. And they have staff of doctors, psychologists, and other medical professionals that evaluate our investigative findings along with the medical records provided by the claimant or collected through treating physicians.
So, in a brief follow-up, in the case of mental disabilities, you stated your findings. How do you communicate those findings with respect to someone who has a mental disability without them actually seeing a mental specialist?
Very good question. So a lot to unpack in that. Okay, so if I were investigating an individual that had a mental impairment of whatever, right? And there's a wide variety of mental impairments, so it may change a little bit. I'll give you a scenario here. Let's say somebody is asserting that they have agoraphobia. Are you familiar with agoraphobia? I wasn't familiar with it. I had to look it up. So it means you're fearful of like ever leaving your house or going out into public or anything else. One of the things that we do and utilize before we ever send investigators into the field is conduct an extensive background check on the individuals, right? That can include everything from searching NCIC for their criminal history to local driving records, court records, using various different databases that are publicly available, but specifically for law enforcement entities. We look at social media. We might talk to neighbors, right? Somebody is saying that they can't do something or they have an impairment that prevents them from working, right? And if you recall, it's either expected to result in death or last for 12 months or longer. So this is before we've ever had the opportunity, and referring to your question before, am I making contact with that individual? If I need to make contact with a person who has a mental impairment, I'm going to consult with our liaison, our specialist at the Kansas Disability Determination Services, so that they can provide a list of criteria that they want me to look for. So for example, you and I are making very good eye contact right now. Let's say somebody that has like an ADHD disorder, they might divert their eyes or have problems with officials, law enforcement officials, teachers, whomever, right? So we would want to know the specific aspects of what the mental impairment might be, and then rely on our specialists within your state at the Disability Determination Services to say, I need you to go look for X, Y, and Z. And then we try to answer those questions from X, Y, and Z, and then we provide those findings back to that specialist so that they can evaluate that in addition to the medical evidence that they have on file to make a proper determination for that individual.
So during that investigation, at no time during the investigative process, does that individual come in contact with that, i.e. medical or mental professional?
So part of the investigative process, they would not be contacting the adjudicator at DDS. One of the avenues for DDS to refer, to gather additional information or evidence is to send the referral to our unit. Most of the time, whenever they do that, they're also sending that person out for what they refer to as a consultative exam. Now, this is an exam that's paid for by the federal government to just the medical professional that you're talking to, and it's not exclusive for mental health. It could be to a physician for lower back issues or a broken leg or whatever the case may be. So they do, in fact, sometimes do that, send them to medical professionals, in addition to referring the case to us to make the observations.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Roser?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple questions. Are you familiar with Governor Laura Kelly's executive order she made earlier this month, 2501, regarding the savings accounts for the foster children?
I am not aware of that, no, ma'am.
Okay. As an outline, foster children who are entitled to Social Security benefits, other types of benefits, are now able to receive those and have ownership of those in an account. The payee is DCF, and it is managed by the oversight, so DCF, caseworkers, foster parents, et cetera. There's a lot of statutes that aren't outlined in that. So one of those being that there's not an outline on what's considered a qualifying expense. My main question was if there was a plan between CDI and DCF to investigate whether or not funds are being, disability funds that now these children are receiving, if they're being utilized properly, or what we are going to define as properly for that.
Very good question. I'm not familiar with that specific executive order, but I can tell you, unfortunately, that is something that we often encounter within these programs, whether it's an adult disabled person that's under the care of, in this case, you referenced the state, or a guardian, or if it's a child that is under the care of a guardian, a parent, or the state. There are, in fact, some specified things from Social Security, and just to keep it simple, when we have an investigation on an individual that we believe may be misusing those funds, we specifically look at, is the child, number one, in the person's care that they say they are, that has the care for them, that has the money, right? Is the food and shelter being provided, and is clothing and the basic necessities for daily living being provided? So that's kind of, from an investigative standpoint, the litmus test that we use. If we find that any of those are missing, that would allow us to further expand our investigation and look at possibly where those funds are going. In most cases, and this would have to be an agreement between the state of Kansas and Social Security and DCF and everybody, how they wanted to proceed with that. But generally speaking, those are the elements that we would look at when we're seeing if the funds are being spent properly on the beneficiary.
Follow-up question. So just to clarify, there isn't a statute that outlines how we would proceed in that event, because, you know, the way I see it is if somebody's being predatory on a child, right? So this child has these funds and they have maybe a biological family member who doesn't have custody of them, or a friend or a mentor, maybe even it's themselves who's abusing this money. Is there a statute that outlines how we are to proceed? Do we prosecute a child? Do we, you know, as an adult, are we going to take these benefits that they are completely entitled to, benefits that Governor Kelly's trying to protect for them right now? Do we withdraw them from the program? Do we do the same things that we would do for an adult who's receiving disability? How do we proceed from there, and how do we protect these kids?
Yes, ma'am. Very good question. I think I understand a little bit better now what you're alluding to. Not knowing the construct of the Executive Order 2501 that you referenced, and to answer your question specifically, yes, all of the requirements that a representative payee in the eyes of Social Security Administration are required to follow are codified under the Social Security Act under Title 42. Forgive me, I don't have the respective subsections memorized, but if I had a child and I wanted to be the representative payee for that child, I would have to file an application with the Social Security Administration so they could legally then send that money to me. Very similar to the state or any other organizational representative payee firm, guardian, whomever. They would have to file that application with the Social Security Administration. The Social Security Administration would evaluate that application to make sure they meet the requirements set forth in the Social Security Act to be the representative payee, and they would be given a very lengthy list of the requirements that they need to continue to meet that. For example, they have to do like an annual accounting form back to the agency. They have to give certain notices if the disabled party were to leave under their control for a certain period of time. There's a lengthy list of things, but yes, ma'am, they're all under the Social Security Act.
So they'd be the liable party.
Correct. The liable party would be the representative payee.
If we're following that implication, then in this case, DCF would be the liable party if they're the payee for that child.
I would have to say whoever is receiving the funds, misuses the funds, could be held liable.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Simmons, and then
Thank you.
Representative Simmons.
Thank you. On page 6, you talk about the gubernatorial election that took place and the switch in administrations. I just want to be clear, are we to understand this was simply a partisan action, the withdrawals? Or was there additional context that might be helpful?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that question. With specific regards to the Kansas Department of Labor not understanding or knowing the political aspects of it, I know that we had a long-standing and a very good relationship with the Kansas Department of Labor. The Secretary of Labor at the time left, which rightly so, change of administrations. We had a period of time where we continued operating without the secretary there. Once the new secretary was placed by the governor, the program was terminated. I have no visibility as to if it was based off of political motive or if they thought it might have a better avenue to do something else.
Do you have any insight into the Overland Park, Kansas Police Department withdrawal?
I do. That's a little different. It just happened to coincide with the governor thing. I met with the command staff, the former chief of police and his command staff there multiple times. And it frankly just came down to not having sufficient law enforcement personnel to conduct the investigations within their jurisdiction. They had empty patrol cars and no one to patrol the city, which is their primary mission. As sad as we were to see them go from a law enforcement professional standpoint, I completely understand the hard decision that the city and the police department had to make.
And one more question on that, please. Have any other cities or localities expressed a similar concern that they might not have the capacity?
Yes, I met with the Johnson County Sheriff's Department. I forget the numbers they told me at the time, but they had a significant amount of vacancies. They were very excited about the possibility of partnering with us. However, they could not justify it without staffing their jails and their patrol units.
Is there anywhere outside of Johnson County?
I have not talked to anyone outside of Johnson County.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Representative Brownlee Page.
So I was just wondering, what are the qualifications for people who work in your unit to have that job?
I'm sorry, ma'am, I couldn't hear you.
What are the qualifications for the people who work in your unit?
Qualifications for people who work in my job. So at the very basic element, all federal law enforcement agencies attend, and they've changed the length of it. It's about a 16-week, 12 to 16-week program at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia. It's a federally recognized academy, if you will, like your police departments and your sheriff's deputies would go to, like the regional one in Johnson County or some of the others that you might have. But at the federal level, we also have significant amount of follow-on training. I will say that the majority of the law enforcement agents that we have with our agency have been law enforcement agencies at either at the municipal, state, or federal level from another agency before they transfer to us. But they still have to meet those basic qualifications.
Can I do a follow-up? Thank you, sir. And I know DEI is out.
Sorry,
Is there-
Representative.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's kind of hard, but yeah,
sorry.
bring that
I
microphone
keep
right on up.
forgetting.
You bet. You bet.
Okay. I know DEI is out, but is there diversity in your department?
I would say, generally speaking, diversity, yes. I mean, we have men, women agents, people of all different national origins, ethnicities that are with my agency. I don't have the specific numbers, but yes, we have quite the diverse portfolio of personnel.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Seeing no other questions, can you walk through kind of a case scenario? Currently, you're working with DCF, and I think there was a question earlier about how that interaction works. But can you walk through what you're currently doing with DCF now, and if the partnership cooperation were to end, what that would look like? So just, you're talking about that idea to put that in statute. So can you give us a real life example of what you're doing now and what would result if that partnership would end?
Yeah, absolutely. If I could refer back to the oral testimony, I believe we opened 90 investigations and closed 80, with a 61 denial or cessation rate by the adjudicators at Kansas DDS. To give you some context, that's 2 investigators from the FIU at DCF, ma'am, a male and a female investigator, that conduct investigations throughout the state of Kansas. Predominantly, we hit that Wichita, Hutch, over to here to Lawrence to Johnson County. That's kind of the circuit of population, correct? So those folks have an exorbitant amount of windshield time going to those locations to conduct the investigations. To the second part of your question, if we were to not have that relationship, there would be a significant capacity issue. So instead of opening 90 investigations in a year, I might only be able to open 10, because it would be the responsibility of one person at that time, my team leader. And frankly, some of the cases, if we have an opportunity to show you, I go out as well and try to fill the void when I can.
And can you talk, so there's a bill we heard a couple years ago with regards to a cross-check mechanism, kind of a third-party cross-check or within an agency cross-check of data. And on Thursday, there's going to be a presentation, Equifax, on some of their third-party capabilities with cross-checking pay data, several different data points that kind of relate to eligibility. And then also we have a presentation from DCF on kind of what they're currently doing. Can you talk about how you use, or if you use, cross-check data within your organization, benefits? Just kind of walk us through what you're seeing.
Yes, absolutely, sir. So, Chairman, we mentioned, Ranking Minority Member Carr and I were discussing, like some of the databases that we use, and we often conduct an extensive background check on somebody, if you will, and develop in the investigation, using certain and multiple different databases, whether it be Alexis Nexus products for general background information on the person, National Criminal Information System, right, NCIC, for law enforcement information. We also have one from Equifax as well that we utilize that gives us information on the individual's earnings, right? Now, why we're looking at that, big government, you have access. It gives you almost live, real-time information of the earnings, not just like a general number, but the most recent quarterly wages that would be reported to your state or to the IRS. Why is that significant in the initial development of any investigation? One, it can help us determine if there's any there for the case based off of if the allegation was purely driven on income implications as being one of the program requirements for supplemental security income and the Title II program, as well as SNAP benefits and Medicaid programs as well. So utilizing that information up front because of those program requirements, we can quickly see if there are any program violations based off of income alone, with the data that's extracted from those systems. So we do use an Equifax product. I'm not sure which one you're referring to, but it's extremely helpful, and it's part of our routine preliminary development on investigations.
Any question? Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on that note, does the state cross-check all of their applicants on that, just since it would be a easy first check? You know, anybody who
I
is
can't
on.
speak to the state, sir. If you're referring to any of the state assistance programs such as the SNAP or Medicaid, I can't speak to their requirements. I can speak to the Social Security Administration. So if you were to come in and file for Social Security today, yes, sir, they would use many databases. That one I'm referring to and others.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
We'll probably see that bill in a hearing coming up sometime in the next few weeks, and more understanding we have of the options and the benefits, the better. So, any further questions on the presentation? Have a couple other handouts, Mr. Espinoza. Anything you want to cover out of those? Looks like some of it's.
Yes, sir. The one that you're holding now is an annual report that we produced from the Kansas CDI unit, just highlighting some of the work that they did, statistical accomplishments. I'd be willing to, I covered some of that in my oral testimony, but I'd be willing to answer any specific questions you might have regarding those statistical accomplishments.
Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you again. What percentage of the program payouts would this be or represent? Do you know?
Percentage of the program payouts?
fraud.
Man, you're going to make me do math. So I think in fiscal year 2024, the Social Security Administration paid out almost 1.7, maybe a little bit over $1.7 trillion. The $8 million in program savings that we reported, I'm not even going to attempt to give you a percentage of that. But comparatively to our work in the past, and then as the chairman had referenced, not having a partner with, like we do now with DCF, we would have probably only been able to do a fraction of that.
Is it correct to say that some of this is preventative as well? If there was no fraud unit, the amount of fraud would probably increase, but just the fact that you're there watching is probably keeping fraud from happening. Is that safe to say?
I would say that's a safe assessment. I would also add that the agency, Social Security Administration, and our state partner with the disability determinations, they also do a significant amount of due diligence to kind of stop things if they see something wrong. But yes.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, committee. Any further questions? Mr. Espinoza. Thanks for your presentation. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your work. Oh, Representative Roser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On this, for your investigations open, closed, and denied, is that 61 out of the 80 that are closed, or is it 61 separate from the 80 that are closed?
No, ma'am, that was 61 out of the 80.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Thank you.
And I think it was, what, 76%?
Yeah, so it's 76%. So
of
I
those
wasn't
cases
sure.
closed. Of those
Okay.
cases closed. It's kind of weird with the math when we're talking about fiscal years. So our fiscal year runs from October 1st to September 30th. So we may have cases that were open in the prior fiscal year that may have been closed out during this fiscal year and then adjudicated in the respective fiscal year. So yes, out of the 80 cases closed, 61 were evaluated by the Disability Determination Services and ceased or denied.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I have a follow-up.
Yes.
Is that trending increase or decrease over the last maybe 5 years?
Trending as far as our production levels?
As far as how many of those full investigations were resulting in claims closed or deceased?
I don't know that I have. I'd have to. Was significantly higher than the previous years because if you recall, we didn't have an investigative partner until January of 24. So they kind of came in 3 months or so already into our fiscal year, and we were still able to accomplish that. So significantly higher trending than the previous years during COVID. I would say it's on par with what we had prior to, like if you go back into 17, 18, and then prior to the Overland Park Police Department leaving in 19.
Okay, so do you feel like the scope of your work with the closures of those two partnerships and the opening of the DCF partnership has altered that shift in what you're seeing for these investigations?
I would say it's comparable to what we had with the comparable to what we had with the previous partners. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much for your
Chairman,
time.
did you, I don't know if you have time, did you want me to cover the presentation?
Sure, if you'd like to.
Yeah, it's entirely up to you, sir.
We have plenty of time, you bet.
Okay. Do you need to take a restroom break?
No, no,
Okay.
I think we're okay on time, and we'll just pull that up for the visual. And I think you're regarding the case study?
Yes, sir.
Is that the document? So we all have that printed off at our place, so once it comes up.
All right, Chairman, what I've prepared for the committee today is just a real quick case study, just to give you an example. We've been talking a lot of abstracts and whatnot with our investigations. I wanted you to be able to see what your unit for Kansas, what the partners with DCF and DDS are doing here in the state, and kind of give you some more context of those questions about how they make medical determinations and whatnot. So on the first case, you'll see here is a claimant from Leavenworth, Kansas, 48-year-old female who alleges disability to multiple alleging allegations, but the one that we're focusing here is that citing that she requires a wheelchair or a walker to ambulate. This, as I referenced in my oral testimony, would be one of those high-risk factors as well for fraud that the Kansas Disability Determination Services would refer over if they've seen some conflicting information in treating physician records as opposed to what the claimant's alleging, and that's what was the case here. So your Kansas CDI investigators went out and made observations. Ranking Member Carr, I think you had referenced, do they go out and see medical professionals? In this first photo here, you'll see just that. They're going to one of those appointments, the consultative exams that we referenced in our discussion earlier. The reason we like to capture this is because whenever someone's going to the doctor, they may present themselves in a different manner to that medical professional than they would in their public lives and outside of that respective setting, right? They're trying to show good cause for why they're there, if you will, not in some cases. So, I'm sorry, you can see here, she's exiting the vehicle. There's a wheelchair present in the photograph. There's a family member or friend, I don't know who the person is, that's helping the lady into the wheelchair. She needed so much help, she couldn't wheel herself. This gentleman helped roll her into the appointment. She goes to the appointment. She has the appointment. She's wheeled back out to the vehicle. She's aided by this gentleman to get back into the vehicle. And it appears she's having some significant issues, which if you would agree or not, she's having some issues of getting out of the wheelchair and back into the vehicle. As noted earlier, we like to make observations and give everybody the benefit of the doubt. In this particular case, the investigators continued their observations following her home, and where they seen her exit the vehicle without the aid of an ambulatory device, assistive device, or wheelchair, and she stayed outside for a significant amount of time walking around her residential area, speaking with members of the community. You can see here she's walking, enjoying some fresh air, playing on her phone. One of the other aspects of being in a wheelchair and requiring a wheelchair or an assistive device to walk was that she could not navigate stairs. As you can see here, she's clearly walking unaided, not even using the handrail up the steps. And she proceeds to be able to bend easily at the knees, the ankles, the back, where she proceeds to sit on the steps for an extended period of time, enjoying the beautiful day it was outside with her family member. Appears to have good dexterity in her legs to be able to cross her legs that way. And then she proceeds to get up and leave the area and actually departed in a vehicle as a passenger. We weren't able to continue our observations. So this is an example of one of our investigations where there was conflicting information in the medical file from what the claimant was saying they can and can't do, as opposed to relevant medical evidence provided either by the claimant or treating physicians that was collected by the Kansas DDS. In this particular case, we provided the same photos that you're looking at back to the Kansas Disability Determination Services in our official investigative report. They made an evaluation, determined that the person did not meet the medical eligibility requirements for disability for the things that they were claiming, and we had a program savings. The reason I wanted to highlight the program savings here, this just happened to be one that I picked. It was a Title 16 or an SSI case. If you'll look at the box where it's checked by Medicaid and then it has the beautiful state of Kansas name in there, you'll see that on average, and this is where the math comes in, so for the state of Kansas, $16,019 for for calendar year 24 was assessed by the U.S. Health and Human Services Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services to determine on average what a recipient of SSI in the state of Kansas might get. So that's where that factor comes in. And then we multiply that out by a 5-year period to get to $80,000 in Medicaid savings. Again, cost share for you and your committee and the great people of Kansas of savings in this one case. The other money that's referenced is the $40,484 is something that was determined by the actuary from Social Security along with our Office of Audit and making a determination of what the average supplemental security income recipient might receive over a period of a year. I believe that's not a year, that's 5 years, I apologize.
We pause for 2 questions. Representative
Please.
Simmons.
Thank you. As you were going through this, I thought about a disabled family member that I have. They have a wheelchair, a cane they use primarily outside of the home because it is safer that way. And I imagine, if someone were to see my family member walking, he tries to do little walks around the block and things like that. But objectively, I think it's understood, and he certainly cannot hold a full-time job in any way, shape, or form with his physical state. So is there any consideration for that? Or if his medical records, for example, did not specify, recommended wheelchair and cane outside the home, ambulatory action within the home, would that be a red flag for you all? How do you deal with those kinds of situations?
And that's a very good question, and I'll just refer back to what we spoke about earlier. Myself and my staff are not medical professionals. Whatever the Disability Determination Services or SSA sees as one of those high-risk factors would refer the case to us and say, hey, can you look for these elements? Is the person out? Are they utilizing the chair in these settings or not? All of that is made by those medical professionals at the state level with DDS, right? So we collect what they ask us to collect so that they can make a very informed medical determination for each individual.
So I guess I'm asking, as a follow-up, would there be opportunity for you all or the individual in question to talk with their medical professional and say, can you please ensure that this is reflected in my paperwork because I'm now under investigation because it was not? Or would that timeline be a problem, the circle back?
Yeah, of course. Every applicant has the right to consult with their medical professionals however they determine necessary, right? So no harm, no foul there. I will also note that there's an appeal process. I think you and I may have spoke about that earlier. So if this person did not like the decision of the Disability Determination Services, whenever they get that notice back saying, hey, we've denied you, they have significant amount of appeal rights, of which can go all the way to the district court through various levels. So, and then they would have an opportunity to present relative, information and whatever associated to their case at that time. So, yeah, yes, to answer your question.
You're going to regret giving me so much helpful context. I have one more question for you. Do they continue to receive those payments during that appeals process, or were they paused?
Now, that's a program technical question, and it depends. If the individual is applying for benefits and has not been paid benefits yet, there is no payments to continue. If the beneficiary is currently receiving benefits, there is a mechanism for them to go to the agency and request continuation of those payments until a decision is made.
Thank you so much for your indulgence.
welcome.
Representative Barth?
Thank you, Chairman Auerkamp and Mr. Espinoza. My question is just around the financials and the savings that you're stating here. So the benefit ends in this case for this person here specifically, so they no longer will receive benefits. It was determined that they actually had functionality, and so the savings is calculated about what they would have been paid now and into the future had they continued to receive the benefit, or is the savings retro back at all? Do they owe anything in the past? It's kind of a two-part question.
Very good question, and my apologies for not clarifying. In this particular case, this is what we would refer to as an initial claim case, so no benefits have been paid yet. So these are specific program savings based off those figures, but you bring up a very good point. If someone were to be, as we were just speaking, currently receiving benefits, if they were found to no longer be disabled or fraudulently represented themselves in a certain way, the agency or DDS could cease those benefits, and a distinction between words. This case was denied. If somebody's in pay, they're ceased, their benefits are ceased. So how we would calculate those benefits is we would take their current monthly amount, and according to the Office of Audit and Office of Actuary through Social Security, project the Social Security portion of that out throughout a period of 5 years, respectively. For the Medicaid or Medicare, same principle applies. The Health and Human Services, Medicaid, and Medicare Services, or Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, provides us that number that you see there, the $16,019. If they were currently in benefits and their benefits were ceased, we would take that, divide that by 12, and then multiply that by the 5 years.
That helps. And then I guess if they were fraudulent in their actions and claim denied, or if they were in the middle of claims, either scenario, how does that impact the future of their Social Security benefits and, you know, for either another disability case or just future use of their Social Security benefits? Is there any penalty or fine for them accessing that in the future?
Unfortunately, there is no current federal legislation that would prevent them from walking back into the Social Security office the very next day and applying for the benefits.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have one more if you have time, if you want to look at it.
Feel free.
More good, great questions. Okay, so this one was out of Overland Park, Kansas. We have a 59-year-old male who had alleged multiple disabilities, which is pretty common, we'll see. Again, could be a high-risk factor depending upon the nature of those. But the one that DDS specifically wanted us to look at here was citing he could not drive and required an assistive device to ambulate. So, our DCF investigators assigned to the CDI unit followed this gentleman from East Overland Park all the way down to Osawatomie, driving about 70 miles an hour on 35, where he said he could not drive, he didn't have the capability of doing it, and he did so successfully. Again, Representative Carr, we were talking about the medical appointments. He was attending an optometry appointment because he had such a hard time seeing. Another reason he couldn't drive, but he drove himself there. The second question as to whether or not, how can he ambulate? And you bring up a good point. Sometimes I may need a walker, I may not need a walker, I may need a cane. He's able to freely get out of his car here, and he gets, what you'll see here in a moment, out of the back of his car, a crutch. You can't really see it here well, and forgive me for not having the video because I didn't know exactly what form we would have here. But he's carrying the crutch the majority of the time, which is odd because if someone needed to use an ambulatory device, they would use it consistent with their disabling condition that required it. You can almost see it here. It's just kind of raised above the ground. But still give the individual benefit of the doubt. We don't make those determinations, of course. This is a case that you can see, this is an initial claim case, but it's concurrent. So this individual was applying for Title II disability insurance and for supplemental security income. So you can kind of see the breakdown there. In the blue, you'll see the T2 amount of $33,210 and the T16 amount of $14,604. And that's just the breakdown of how we get the $47,814 for the cost savings. Again, a denial, not a cessation. And then concurrently, the number on the bottom of the 1619 is the Medicaid amount that we would utilize in this particular case. Now, you may ask, why is it multiplied by 3 on top, multiplied by 2 on the bottom? There's a waiting period for an individual to get on Medicare, so they subtract those 2 years off, and then we multiply those 2 years off in the concurrent cases by the associated Medicaid numbers. And that, sir, is all that I have for you. If you have any questions, members of the committee, I thank you very much for your time today. Thank you.
Representative Brownlee Page.
When you followed them, did you do it more than once or just one time they just followed them to the doctor's office?
Multiple times. We try to get as many observations as we can. The more observations, the better the medical professional can have to evaluate.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, thank you very much again. Appreciate your time. Thanks for coming. Thanks for all your work. And with that, we'll
Thank you, Chairman.
conclude. Any comments, questions for the committee? We are meeting on Thursday, a couple presentations, kind of on the cross-check system. I'm going to try to get some better understanding of the cross-check options. Is there a benefit? Is it worth having a hearing on the bill? Try to dive into that a little bit. That's the intention behind the Thursday meeting. Without any questions, thank you very much, committee. We are adjourned.